There we go. Go. Well, welcome. Appreciate everybody being out here tonight. Hope everybody's enjoying this beautiful day, wonderful weather, the cicadas, constant it's yeah, somewhat mesmerizing.
Can't hear you, Jay. I think it went on mute or something.
Hear me now?
Yep,
Yes.
loud and clear. Thanks.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. So we have come to our last meeting before we kind of start our summer schedule, which is sort of an every other week schedule. But we will be off for 2 weeks. So next week is obviously Memorial Day. So we will take Memorial Day off, and then we'll be off the week after that, which I think is the 3rd of July or June. We will have a volunteer meeting that week. And so I will put that out there that anybody who's interested in volunteering with this group, if you're interested in sharing your story or just going on the volunteer list, if you kind of, feel like you got something to help and share. I mean, this is a ministry that has sort of been self-perpetuating for 30 plus years. You're welcome to come. So we will meet here on the 3rd, but the idea will be to kind of talk about programming and things we can do to improve the group and increase outreach and all that. So it'll be a volunteer meeting, won't be information on career transition. But if you would like to come to that, more than welcome to come to that. And then we'll be back here with our sort of regularly scheduled programming on June the 10th. And pretty much we'll have kind of an every other week cadence. I'll send out like an email that has like the full kind of summer calendar. But it falls pretty well with, July 4th and kind of going all the way up until I think we'll have 2 weeks off at the very end of the summer before Labor Day. And then we'll go back to weekly, but that will kind of be our cadence. But yeah, not back here for 2 weeks unless you want to come to the volunteer meeting on the 3rd. Since we do have Chris is new, it sounds like you found your way here or found your way to our website if you got the email. But just do want to always remind folks, if you haven't, go to our website, bumc.net/career. Make sure you register for our emails, follow us on social media, and last but not least, certainly at the bottom, click on the hyperlink that says handouts and presentations. That will take you to the Box account. That's our share drive repository. Tons of good stuff in there. Most importantly, that's our volunteer. It's where you find our volunteer list. And so you can reach out to folks on that list and they will help you with kind of whatever you need with your search. And then there's that within that Box account, it's just a great repository of, we've got sample resumes, sample marketing brief, presentations from past years and all that. I know have been tardy in getting all this stuff up there. It's on my to-do list for the week. I will get all of this series on there as well. So let's see here. Scott, do you want to say a word on Stephen's ministry and say a word of prayer for us, and then we'll get rolling with tonight.
All right. Stephen Ministry, another ministry of the church. It's a program, it's worldwide. But if you're going through a rough time in life and off your game, they'll pair you with someone that's basically your best friend for a season. That could be job transition. It could be marital issues, health issues, parenting issues, financial problems, anything that's got you off your game. And a Stephen Minister is just someone you can talk to completely confidential. We're not counselors and we're not pastors. We are just, like I said, your best friend for a season to help you work through, basically someone to listen. We've had a lot of training to help you and not cross boundaries and stuff like that. But it's, I like to say is don't go it alone through your good times and don't go it alone through your bad times. And so to get a Stephen Minister on the volunteer list that Jay talked about is Cheryl Davis. Her name's in there, her contact, and it's SHERYL. And she will pair you up with the perfect person. Cheryl has this hotline to God, And between the two of them, they just do it well. Don't hesitate to take advantage of that program. It is amazing support. And with that, shall we say a word of prayer? God, thank you. Thank you for bringing us together. Thank you for this ministry. Thank you for the opportunity to fellowship with each other, to support each other. And God, thank you for Jay tonight, for the work and for the inspiration he's put into this series that he's presenting. God, help us to understand that you have our careers under control, and that we can just trust you to make the plan work, even though we may not agree or understand the plan sometimes. We can trust you that you have it under control. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right. Thank you, Scott. Cool. Well, let's get into the final part of this sort of, I gotta get to where I see it. All right, move that up more. Welcome. All right, cool. So we've come to the end. I have this habit of looking behind me, and there's nothing behind me. But we've come to the end of this this sort of series that I put together on kind of your transition journey, right? And sort of, again, we started with sort of thinking of this in sort of the context of taking a journey, whether it's cross country trip or going across the ocean, or however you want to think about it. But sort of our stages along the way, we're sort of taking stock, kind of getting grounded in some sort of fundamentals kind of around our search to sort of keep in mind, and then kind of going through the process of kind of figuring out where it is that we want to go, right? What is that sort of, what's that destination for us? And just kind of taking a look back to that. And I'll post all these online, Chris, because I know it's your first time, so you didn't have the benefit of the first 3 weeks, but we'll get all this posted up, and feel free to reach out to me with questions. But ultimately, we kind of went through the whole sort of concept around, Ikigai and your value system, and kind of thinking about what it is you're really good at, and what's important to you, right? Your sort of what and your why, and kind of putting that all together, ultimately landing on, kind of three criteria or sort of three, criteria of what's the role that you want, the type of job that you want, the role, what's the industry you want to work in, and what type of company or organization do you want to work for. That's essentially kind of what you have to define, right, when you're sort of choosing your destination. So we talked about that. We talked about then building your toolkit to sort of go out and find it, right? And the sort of key elements of that were your LinkedIn profile, your resume, your personal marketing brief, and your elevator pitch, and your personal branding statement, right? And kind of putting all those together. And then last week we talked about kind of charting your course and sort of networking into where you're trying to go, right? Trying to get from point A to point B. I now know that I want to work in for a mid-sized company in healthcare as a director of marketing, right? I mean, that's sort of identified. And so how do we sort of identify companies that look like that? And how do we network our way into it? That's what we talked about last week. And so this week, we're going to talk about finishing the journey, which is essentially kind of about interviewing. So crush your interview and finish that journey, right? Acing the interview for your dream job is really the final step in this. And so there's two real areas that we're going to focus on when it comes to interviewing. One is really the blocking and tackling. That's the sort of the basics, the stuff that everybody should do. It's not going to win you the job, but if you don't do it, it very well may lose you the job, right? So it's just kind of the fundamental stuff that you ought to be doing. And then secondly is win them over, right? Connect with them in a way that that other candidates don't, so that you leave no doubt that you're the person for the job. Just about every person I've ever interviewed in my professional career, the person that gets the job, it ultimately comes down to what everybody will say is fit, right? It's fit. Has very little to do with kind of raw talent, qualifications, experience, etc. Because most of that sort of gets screened through in the, you know, in the sort of resume and then maybe in the first round of interviews, right? You know, I rarely would interview somebody who's not qualified to do the job, that doesn't have the right background, that doesn't have the right credentials, that doesn't have the right, you know, licensure, et cetera, to do a job, right? Ultimately, it really does kind of come down to that. You know, they call it like the, what is it? It's like the airport test, right? It's like if we're traveling together and our flight gets delayed 4 hours and I'm stuck 4 hours sitting in an airport with this person, is it going to be somewhat pleasant, or am I going to be pulling my hair out? Right. And so that's ultimately what a lot of it comes down to. So it's that concept of kind of winning them over. Okay. What's that?
Everybody's in their phone.
That's yeah, that's right. That statement's pre-phone. Now everybody can just, you know, they can all just scroll Instagram reels and not worry about it. But anyway, so let's get ready for your interview. Abraham Lincoln, I will prepare. Someday my chance will come. All right, so preparation, the interviewing, blocking, and tackling, right? So these are kind of the three key areas that I think about when it comes to getting ready for your interview, right? And one is doing research, right? Researching the company. Now that you got the interview, you want to dig into understanding the company that you're going to be meeting with. You know, preparation. You want to prepare for the interview. I mean, I mentioned this before, but you know, it's what people say about you know, police and soldiers, you know, that when they're in that stressful sort of environment, they fall back on their training, right? And it's the same concept, right? It's not obviously not as stressful as environment as being in combat, but it's that same concept that if you've well prepared for the interview, if you've asked yourself the questions in the mirror, if you've rehearsed all of this sort of stuff, it's going to come out a lot easier, a lot less stressful, and you're just going to be a lot more at ease if you feel prepared for an interview than if you don't. And follow up, right? You know, once your interview is complete, make sure that you follow up appropriately with the folks that you interview with, right? So let's talk about pre-interview research and kind of doing a deep dive on the company. Obviously, we talked about, you know, you've done some level of research on all these companies because that's sort of what led you to them. But you know, now you've got an interview, you got to get real serious about doing research, right? So you want to look into, you know, what are recent company events, performance of the company, bios on the people that are going to be interviewing with you. You know, what are their kind of, you know, what are their products, their offerings, their market segments, all that sort of stuff. What is their kind of unique company value proposition? Learn a little bit about the history of the company. Know the names of the key execs, you know, their CEO, their CFO, particularly like the folks that are going to be in your line, right? If you're in finance, you're going to want to know the CFO. If you're in marketing, you're going to want to know the name of the chief marketing officer or their sort of head of XYZ brand, et cetera. So know what those people are and have some sense of the culture, right? Have some sense of what their culture is like, what they would say is unique about their culture. Resources to do this. So obviously the company website, it's kind of self-explanatory. If it's a public company, they'll have an investor relations site, which will have a lot more information about the company. It'll have presentations that they've done at investor conferences and things like that. Also, if it's public, they'll have to file public filings, 10Ks, 10Qs. Those are available for public. Usually they'll also post them on their investor relations site, or you can just go to, there's a public site called Edgar that you can get them off of. You know, if it's public, there'll be earnings releases that you can read. I would definitely recommend listening into, you know, their most recent earnings conference call. That usually will be posted on their website for a period of time. You'll be able to hear a playback of that. You know, go back through the notes that you have from your networking meetings and folks that you met that, you know, worked at this company or maybe worked at a competitor or just in the industry, what they said about it. Look around on LinkedIn, do a search on LinkedIn, obviously look at the company page, and then you can just do a search for the company and you can look for, you know, articles that folks have posted. And the last one is, I think it's a great resource, podcasts. You will find most companies, you know, Google or do it like a search for their CEO or high-level executives. Almost all these companies, their CEO has ended up on somebody's podcast talking about the business in some way, shape, or form. And so listen to that. I mean, it's a great thing to reference in your interview. You know, hey, you know, yeah, actually, listen to this podcast that, you know, John Smith was on and he talked about XYZ and I thought that was great. You know, it's just, it shows that you've done your homework. It shows that you're paying attention and you're kind of digging in. So this is a great resource. All right, so let's talk a little bit about interview preparation. Essential, be prepared. Again, it's going to reduce that stress level. It's going to make you present better, and it's going to leave you know, as little chance as possible that you're going to end up getting the job. Right. So just be in terms of, you know, being prepared. You know your logistics, know where you're going, know where you're going to park. You know, I mean, you don't have to necessarily do a test run, but you know, definitely have a sense of where you're going, how long it's going to take to get there, you know, what the parking situation is, all of that. Give yourself some extra time, but don't roll into the interview 45 minutes early, right? Because that looks a little weird too. So I would say don't actually walk into their offices more than 10 minutes ahead of time. If you get there half hour, 45 minutes early, hang out in your car, go take a walk, whatever. Don't get yourself all sweaty and nasty though, I will say that. But just, you know, you use common sense, but definitely make sure that you arrive on time. Again, you know, just simple stuff like lay your clothes out the night before, right? So you don't have to worry about what you're going to wear, all of that. You know, again, it sounds simple, but you know, it can help. It reduces that stress level, the day of. I always err on the side of dressing nicer. I know so many places have gone super casual these days. I would still recommend, you know, putting on a suit, going in there. If they're really casual, maybe you drop the tie. But you know, I would, as a man, I would never go to a job interview where I wasn't wearing at least a jacket, right? And I don't care how casual the company is. I don't care if everybody's in, you know, jeans and golf shirts, shorts and golf shirts. I'm gonna wear a jacket. What's that?
It's okay to ask the next question. How to the screen, especially with the HR screener, right? Not people.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think it's fair. I mean, but I mean, again, unless they just really stress it. And again, I work in finance, so it's a little bit different, I guess, in the tech worlds, you know, marketing, some of these other worlds that have always been a little more casual than finance. You know, maybe you do want to sort of dress more to mirror them. But again, I would just always err on the side of being a little bit dressier than they are, right? At a minimum, like if they're all wearing golf shirts, you know, wear a button up, you know, kind of thing. But so again, that's kind of me. Always have a backup copy of your resume. Don't always assume they will print it. Yeah, go ahead. Women.
For the attire for women, you've got pantsuits, you've got skirts and dresses. Again, how do you gauge that for women?
Wow, I'm really out of my depth on this one.
But you need to
That's right. I know we're here to serve all. Unfortunately, my knowledge of women's fashion is not, you know.
Part of it, wear something that makes you feel professional, right? The equivalent of the suit and the coat, you know, if it is pantsuit, then that works, you know, not necessarily a big fluffy blouse with it, something a little more, depending on where. Well, yeah. So just something that I think people would consider sophisticated and professional.
Yes, well said. Well said. Yeah, I think as a rule of thumb, at a minimum, you kind of always want to dress a little bit nicer than everybody else in the office, right? Like just at least a notch. So again, you kind of got to gauge it based on what they wear. But yeah, you want to feel professional in what you're doing, and you feel like that you're well dressed relative to your audience.
So like I'm 4.5 months into a job, and people where I'm working that dress much more casually than I do. But I still feel like I'm new, and I still need to present a certain image.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I'm thinking, what image do I want to have going forward? What kind of roles do I want to go into? And does that affect the way I dress now too? So it's kind of like an ongoing thing that I keep thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Dress for the job you want.
yeah, that's right. The old dress for the job that you want. I think it makes a lot of sense.
I would say ask, ask if you need to wear the tie.
Yeah, I would probably just ask, you know, what is the dress code in the office, and what do interview candidates typically, right? Will they, or maybe just say, will they typically wear a tie, right?
First time in my career, the last time I got a job, for the first, I knew I was going into a job where it was super casual. I mean, the president, the executive of the company, interviewed with polo and tennis shoes. Okay, so.
Yeah, I mean, I get it.
I mean, I walked in there, I had a blazer, you know, and I didn't put a tie on, I wasn't, you know, the blazer and slacks, it wasn't suit, you know. I took it down, I didn't want to alienate myself,
Right.
you know, in a blazer, you know, that's professional, but it's also not over the top.
That's right. And I would say in most situations, that's what I would wear to an interview, because most places now have gone so casual that they're, you know, the person across the table from you is probably in, you know, chinos and maybe a golf shirt if it's summertime, or, you know, a button down if it's wintertime. But yeah, so you're definitely, you know, professionally dressed, just wearing a blazer and not a full suit for sure. But there may be, you know, places that are a little bit more formal where you still want to wear the suit. So,
Hey,
but yeah, I
Jay,
think it's fine to ask. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm still doing a lot of, I mean, I haven't had an in-person interview in probably 6 years. Every interview, even if it's a hybrid, I'm only interviewing for hybrid or remote, but even if they're hybrid, it's all been virtual for me. So, I wear like a nice bright colored shirt, like a solid blue or black, or, you know, professional.
Yeah, that's great.
But
Yeah, and I would
everybody-
give the same advice for virtual interviews too.
Yeah, still dress up and wear pants. Always wear pants. You never know when you.
That's right. You never know when something's going to startle you and you
Yes,
jump up,
yes.
and then if you're not, it's game over, right?
That's
It's that blocking and tackling. It's those killers, interview killers that I was talking
Right.
about. So wear the pants. Okay. Let's see here. Always take a backup copy of your resume. Just take one with you. I know it's really old school, and you definitely don't have to print it on like super fine stationery like people used to do. But don't always assume somebody's going to have it, right? And that, you know, printer's not, you know, way down the hall or something, and just have it. Let's see here. Pick 4 or 5 questions that you know you're going to get in the interview, right? These are interview questions to you, and practice them in a mirror repeatedly, right? Practice them in the car while you're driving. I mean, just, you know, say them out loud, get to where you can answer them succinctly. If you've got somebody who will do a mock interview with you, great. But just at a minimum, kind of ask yourself the question and then speak the answers out, and get to where you can do it in a very succinct fashion. Let's see here. Study the job description. Be prepared to speak to why you're a great fit for the role. You know, again, practice this. But again, this kind of goes back to, you know, kind of week 1 where we talked about this sort of core tenets and that sort of entrepreneurial mindset, right? So always be thinking about, here's the value that I bring to you. Here's what I'm really good at. Here's what I can really help you with. And again, have 4 to 5 questions about the company that demonstrate that you've done your homework on the company, right? You know, reference, hey, you know, I read this article, how you all are coming out with this new product. You know, tell me a little bit more about that, or tell me how, you know, you guys go to market when you launch something like that, right? Something that, I mean, don't make it a total throwaway, right? I mean, it should be something you are interested in learning, but it also shows that you've done your homework on your company. And do have a lot of questions, because, you know, you'll go through the ringer. And, you know, most cases you'll interview with 8 or 9 people. So it's not like you know, and you can ask the same question repeatedly, but, you know, you want to have a bunch of questions. So, but again, make sure you have at least 4 or 5 good ones that kind of show that you've done your homework. Let's see here. Follow up like a pro, right? So your work's almost done when you walk out of the interview, but not just yet. I'm a big believer in sending thank you notes. If you have beautiful penmanship, I think sending a handwritten thank you note is a lost art. I would highly recommend doing it. No one does it anymore, and it will absolutely set you apart. People will be like, wow, handwritten thank you note, right? I mean, it's not going to get you the job if you totally blew the interview, but it will definitely set you apart. So if you have nice penmanship, I recommend doing that. My penmanship is terrible. It's absolutely terrible. So I'm self-conscious about it, so I don't. I will just send an email. It's fine to use a generic kind of email template, but do make sure you customize it, and really make sure that you didn't copy the one from your last interview and you put like wrong company name and all of that kind of stuff in. Really make sure that you don't do that, right? It's again, it's the stuff that you trip and stepping on rakes that you got to make sure that you don't do. But always make sure that you make it specific. Reference something that you talked about. Really enjoy learning more about this. Again, you don't have to write 3 paragraphs. Make it short and sweet, but do send it out, and make sure you send it within 24 hours of your interview. Also, if they ask you for anything, send that within 24 hours. So they ask you for references, they ask you for a writing sample, whatever it is, make sure you get that out the door very, very quickly. Make sure you continue to, do your research, keep your eye out for news, events on the company. Those are great ways to kind of follow up. Hey, just saw you guys launching this initiative, whatever. It kind of gives you an excuse to follow up kind of throughout the process. But I will say, don't follow up too soon or too often. Obviously, that first 24-hour window, you're sending the thank yous and anything they ask for. But after that, no sooner than a week. And then after kind of your first follow up, maybe no sooner than every couple of weeks, right? I mean, you don't want to hound people. They will get annoyed, but I think it is fair to just continue to follow up and sort of see where the process is. So that's good. If you do get passed over for the job, always ask for feedback. Some companies won't give it to you. Some have pretty strict HR policies around that. So if they won't, it's fine, but sometimes they will. And it's certainly valuable to get. So it never hurts to ask, always ask for it. All right, so let's talk about winning them over in an interview. How do you win folks over in an interview, right? So I think the formula for winning someone over is you want to be memorable, right? You want to stand out from the sea of the interviews that they have met, right? You want to be relatable. You want to relate to them so that they understand how well you fit with the team, and you want to stress how valuable that you are. You want to make it clear to them that you understand the value that you bring to the company, right? Those are really the 3 things that I think really will set you apart when you're in an interview, right? So how do you do that? Well, I think that the best way to do this, the way to sort of hit all of those, is through storytelling, right? So I love this quote: storytelling is the most powerful way to put ideas into the world today. So you're going to win them over with the power of storytelling. So winning an interview with storytelling, going beyond just mere interview answers. Storytelling is an incredible tool to connect with your audience and make you memorable. It's a masterful way to connect with your interviewer in a way that will highlight both your value, but also makes you memorable. Provides a window into the authentic you to your interviewer, and will make you more relatable. Highlights areas of commonality that you have with your interviewer. You're telling them a story and they'll be like, oh yeah, we had that exact same thing, right? It's just a great way to sort of make those connections. It's a great way to get relevant facts of your accomplishments out there without sort of seeing rote or boring, right? It keeps the interview more engaging, lighter, funner. It humanizes your work history in a way that your resume can't, right? And again, I've talked about the resume the resume is really a tool to get you the job. The resume kind of checks those boxes of, is he qualified to do it? The answer is yes, but it's that interview and it's the stories that you're going to tell that are going to help you sort of win them over and sort of check that fit box. Again, enhances your accomplishments, contextualize them, in ways that wouldn't otherwise be apparent. So the elements of an interview story are not, dissimilar than the elements of any story, right? You got your characters, right? You and then the relevant actors. So, who is important? It's you, your team, the competitors that you're up against, etc. You got to set the stage, right? Where were you working? When? What was the situation? The problem, right? The issue at hand. What was the key problem and the issue that you were facing? What was the action? What was the action that you took? How did you solve the problem? How did you add unique value? And the resolution. What were the results? So again, it's all the components of every story that's ever been told since since people started telling stories. But it is a great way to to think of your interview answers in this context of storytelling. And again, I think it will make you come off less rote and more unique in your answers. And the good news is like think about your past, think about 6 or 8 stories that you could tell about, things that you've done, things that you've accomplished, difficult people that you've worked with, teams that you've led, obstacles you've overcome. These are, and you can use the same 6 or 8 stories for probably 40 or 50 different interview questions, right? They'll ask the same question in different ways. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I can use that story of, that team that I led that, trained all those people, right? And in the midst of COVID, right? And how we had to overcome doing it all remotely and change on the fly and this and that, right? And so just once you get a good solid group of stories that are well rehearsed, you can use them kind of infinitely. So let's see here. Making your stories your stories. So again, it's a great way to communicate your value and make yourself memorable. They must be yours, right? So you can make yourself the hero, that's fine, but do make sure you give credit to others. Be authentic, be truthful. These don't have to be tall tales, right? Feel free to infuse humor, but never be crude, never be insulting. Include relevant descriptions and adjectives. Make it a compelling narrative, not just a recitation of facts. Again, it's a story. It's not sort of a rote, well, you did this and we did this and, et cetera. Infuse the story with your own unique values, right? So that they ring through as a consistent theme. You can include emotional elements that you experience yourself and the team. That will help you connect, and make sure that your stories include some sort of an aha moment of achievement, clarity, resolution, how you concluded things, what you learned. Okay, so now you have these stories. How can I use my stories? I kind of already but most behavioral interview questions can be answered with a well-crafted story, right? And so these are just a few examples of, kind of interview questions that are, ready-made for a great story, right? So tell me about your greatest accomplishment. Describe a time when you went above and beyond at work, time you had to deal with a difficult employee or a difficult client, time you disagreed with your superior and how you managed through it. What's your greatest strength? What's your greatest weakness, right? A concise story is a great example of, demonstrating your greatest strength or what your greatest weakness is and how you sort of, work to mitigate that, right? I think when folks ask about that weakness, they're asking you and they want to see what your self-awareness is. But it also is a way to demonstrate, here, look, these are things that I just know I'm not good at. Here's how I mitigate around it. And let me tell you a little story about that. What would you consider your greatest personal achievement or professional achievement, a time that you failed professionally, and what would you do differently? A coworker, a customer that got angry and how you handled it, hardest decision that you had to make in your last job. What are you passionate about? What brings passion to your work, right? All of those and some of them are kind of variations of the same question, right? And again, it just kind of, once you've got good 6 or 8 of these, you can use those to answer probably 80% of the questions that you're going to get in an interview. All right. So close out the win, right? In addition to great stories and your experience, these are other keys to winning, winning an interview. If you haven't been asked, do make sure you give them 3 bullet point statement of why you're a great fit for the role, right? Sometimes they'll ask you that question right off the bat, but sometimes, you may, anything else you want us to know, right? Just, hey, I just want you to know I'm super excited about working here. I love, culture, team, et cetera. And I'm going to be great at this, great at that. And it can really help you with this. Boom, boom, boom. Express excitement, enthusiasm about joining the company, joining the team. Ask what next steps there are. And if there's anything else that they need, right? Always be asking about what the next steps are coming out of the interview. And is there anything else you need from me? Treat everyone that you meet, like, from the security guard to the CEO of the company, the same. Treat them all with respect. You never know. You never know who gets pulled into that interview room. And it's just, it's frankly just a great, kind of mantra to live by. But definitely make sure you're doing that when you're going in for an interview. Mind your body language, right? People say, obviously, what is the 80% of communication is nonverbal, but, you know, you do want to make sure, don't slouch, sit upright, you know, keep it, you know, they say to keep kind of an open posture. Closed posture is sort of considered negative. So, you know, sit up, open posture, and smile. Don't stumble over small talk. You know, interviews definitely can be awkward. When all else fails, you can always talk about sports, kids, or the weather, right? That will cover 90% of the small talk that you probably ever have in your life. Will make things less awkward. Definitely compliment the interviewer, things that you like about them, things that you like about the company. I love that the way that you all do this. You know, I noticed that, yeah, pick out things in their office. Oh, really cool. I see that you've been here. That's the coolest place, you know, whatever. And again, avoid landmines, right? Don't step on the brakes, never curse, never insult people that you used to work with. You know, if your old boss was a SOB, don't sit there and tell them that your boss was an SOB, right? Don't talk bad about anybody, people you've worked with, etc. You know, those are just huge no-no. So again, a lot of it's just making sure that you kind of do the blocking and tackling, and you avoid, you know, stepping on brakes when you're doing an interview. All right. So so that's kind of, now we've got the job, right? So I've included just a couple other sort of notes here on other things that you may encounter, I guess, as you're sort of going through your process. But let's just assume now that we've got the job, so let's negotiate. You do not get what you want, you get what you negotiate. So just tips on negotiation. You did it. You have the offer in hand. Now let's do some negotiation. So stay within the bounds when it comes to salary. Stay within the bounds of the ranges discussed. Don't be afraid to ask for a little bit more. You know, if they've sort of communicated, you know, salaries between this and this, feel free to make your case like, okay, here's why I ought to be at the top end of the range. But if they told you all along that, you know, the salary range is $60,000 to $80,000 a year, I wouldn't go back and ask them for $95,000, right? Do always be honest about your prior compensation. I just, you know, I think it's bad to, I'm just a big believer. It's bad to start off any relationship with a lie. And this is obviously a big relationship you'd be starting off. So, you know, if you used to make $65,000 a year, don't tell them that you used to make 80 so you can get to the top end of that range. You know, again, highlight your experience, highlight your value proposition. If you think that there's a reason that you command more than they're offering, feel free to do that. Feel free to reference any, market benchmarks that you can verify. But I will say I'm kind of leery of a lot of stuff that gets posted on the internet, on Glassdoor and stuff like that. But if you've got a real benchmark that you know of, hey, I know so-and-so just started at XYZ company. It's just like you all in there. I do know for a fact they're starting people at, $80,000 over there. So I kind of feel like 75 to 80 is a reasonable number here. Feel free to cite that. Always stay positive, stress your excitement for the role, that you just want to make sure that your compensation is market when you start. If you need more time, this was one that I ran into, not necessarily from negotiating, but when I took my current job, I had another job offer that actually came in first, and I really kind of wanted to get this job offer. And so, I had to do a little bit of a dance. I don't think there's anything unethical in doing that. But if you're ever looking for reasons, you can always ask to meet with more people at the company, right? I'm really excited, but I really would feel better if I had a chance to meet with, this person, this person, this person. Like, okay, well, they're so-and-so's on vacation this week, but, they'll be back next week. Well, you just bought yourself a week, right? Because these processes generally move fairly slow. So, you can buy yourself a week or two doing that. You're never going to probably buy yourself a month, but, I did a little bit of that, and was able to sort of, at the same time, tell my current employer, hey, I just got a job offer. Like, we're going to do something. I need something from you all. And, within a week's time or so, they were able to pull something together and ended up working out for me. But, so those are the, type of things. And the last one I have on here is just remember, pigs get fed. It's the old adage, pigs get fed, hogs get slaughtered. Just don't get too greedy, and don't get too wrapped up on your initial salary with a company. That's one thing that I was, if I could tell, particularly young people coming out, people get so wrapped up in like, starting at X and, oh, I heard, so-and-so starting at Y, whatever. Look, if you come in and you work hard and you do a good job, most companies, 5 years from now, your compensation will probably be dramatically different than it is today. So don't get too wrapped up in, they're at 60 and I want to be at 65. You come in and you knock the cover off the ball, you do a great job, and you get promoted twice. 5 years from now, you're going to be making 100 and you're not going to be worried too much that, you wanted 65 and they offered you 60 kind of thing. So just don't put too much into that. But again, feel free to negotiate to some degree. Just lastly, I talked a little bit about this kind of week one, but just kind of, parting advice, I guess, as we sort of wrap this up, is surviving the roller coaster, right? Because job search really is, it's ups and downs. Transition is a long process, particularly the older you are, the more niche you are. It just takes time, right? And I remember the last time I went through transition, I ran into an old coworker of mine who had landed, and I kind of explained to him, what was going on with me, or I guess I'd reached out to him, and he was just like, yeah, it sucks, whatever. I went through it last year. He's like, it's gonna take you probably 5 to 6 months. Right. It's like, you got to get out there, you got to network, you got to put your name out there. And it's just like, but he's like, for me, after about 5 months, like things just started happening. Like you put enough sort of irons in the fire and seeds out there that stuff starts to sprout, stuff starts to grow. And again, that timetable could be more or less kind of just depending on your specific situation. But I just say to say that, for most folks, again, unless you're like fresh out of school, or you're just looking for something that's real low skill, you're probably not going to walk out of a job one day and find a new job in 2 weeks. You just probably not. It is a process, and will take some time. So just my tips and advice for surviving the roller coaster that is job transition. So avoid bad habits. Again, I talked a little bit about that. I fell into some bad habits when I was in transition the last time. Just being at home all day, walking in the kitchen, grabbing food out of the pantry, just stuff like that. So, sleeping in, bored, eating because you're bored. It's stuff like that can creep in, right? And so I think transition is a great time to start new habits, good habits. And so focus on trying to mitigate and make sure that you don't start any bad ones. And if you can, start some new ones. Use the time to your advantage. So, whether that's exercise, whether that's daily prayer, meditation, etc. But, pick at least, maybe one positive habit. Be like, I'm going to use some of this time to focus on that. I am a big believer in exercise. Get some sort of exercise 5-6 days a week. I mean, it doesn't mean you have to go to a CrossFit class and do crazy stuff. But at least get out, take a walk, do something. Get outside. It does wonders for you. Daily meditation, prayer, gratitude, whatever. I think also it's just a great way to sort of stay grounded and positive throughout the process. Find a great support network, and try and meet with folks from that. Weekly, biweekly. Obviously, this is a support network. But if you can find other folks that are in your specific industry or functional area that are also in transition, I would highly encourage you, find 3 or 4 of them, grab coffee once a week, kind of talk about, it's just great. You can bounce ideas off each other, what's working, what's not working. You can commiserate. I mean, it's just, it's a process, and that definitely can help. Find some good social outlets to replace work. I mean, particularly as adults, we forget about how much work is a social outlet for us, right? I mean, when you're a kid and you're in school and activities, whatever, it seems like there's no shortage of ways that you kind of interact with other people. When you're a professional adult, I mean, sometimes work's it, right? That's the only time you see any other people other than maybe your family, right? And if you're single, you're not seeing anybody at home, right? And so I do think transition, it can be a time that can be really difficult, just from a loneliness, social interaction, et cetera. So, find some other outlet. Use the time, get involved in a, running club or basket weaving club, whatever it is you're into, but find some other sort of social outlet, to stay connected with others. That's not, and it certainly doesn't have to be anything that's professionally warranted. Probably better that it's not, just to, again, kind of keep that human interaction going. What's that? Volunteer. But yeah, volunteer is great. I mean, it kind of serves multiple purposes, right? Because in some respects, you may be able to put that on a resume. It may be a great story to tell of, here's how I'm staying productive and staying active, and here's how I'm using the skills that I have to benefit others, and that type of thing. It doesn't have to be. I'm not saying if you're called to, go do a habitat build, but you work in, marketing. I mean, maybe not as relevant, but it definitely could be relevant. So yeah, volunteering, yeah, it's a great idea. I always tell people, remember, it will take longer than you think it should. Everything does. I know when you're in transition, it is the number one priority, right? It's like you wake up every day and you think about, I gotta do something about my job search, right? It is the first priority for you when you are working in a company and you're in a department of 10, 20, 30, 100 people, and there's an open position. It is not the number one priority that you have to fill that position. It just isn't, right? There's 8 million other things going on, and, projects and deadlines and reporting and this and that. And it's like, oh yeah, and by the way, remember Barbara left, 6 months ago, we still haven't filled that role. It's like, yeah, well, we need to do something about that, because that would really help us do all this other crap that we have to do. But somebody's got to get around to filling that role. It's like, okay, well, somebody's got to write the job description and get the approval from HR, et cetera. So it's never the number one priority. It always takes longer. You'll interview with a place. They'll say, you're great, but we really want you to meet with, Sue and Bob, and, Sue's on a 2-week river cruise in Europe. And so she won't be back until July. And so, and then you're just stuck waiting. Right. And it's just, oh man, will this ever end? And the good news is it does, but it always takes longer. So just kind of always remember that, and kind of build your psyche around it. And last but certainly not least, reach out for help when you need it. It's a difficult time. As Scott mentioned, earlier, Stephen's Ministry is a great program if you think you could benefit from that. Certainly not, not everybody wants to Stephen minister, wants to participate in that, but just, find your outlets, find your resources. And again, don't be afraid to reach out for help. It's a long and arduous process. All right. And so that's kind of it. So for next time, just some things to think about, develop a checklist you can use when researching companies, develop a sample list of questions you'll want to ask companies that you interview with. You'll always want to customize that after you've done your research. Put together, have your template thank you note ready to go, but remember, you're always going to want to customize that. Get a list of interview questions, begin preparing those, right? Note the ones as you're doing interviews. That's another thing I tell people, especially when you're first looking. I would err on the side of taking more interviews. Like, even if it's a company that you're like not wild about, right? I would just take the interview just for the practice, frankly. I mean, just to get in the rotation, right? It's almost like spring training to some degree, right? You want to get some, probably the worst thing in the world could ever happen to you is that, like, your very first interview is for your dream job, right? Because you're probably going to screw that up. So you probably want a few reps interviewing for a job that you're like, man, I wasn't really big on that job anyway. And then hopefully down the road, you'll be a little bit more prepared when that perfect job comes along. Let's see here. Work on your stories. See how they fit with kind of the traditional models, storytelling. Practice your answers in front of the mirror so that you can deliver them in a smooth, confident fashion. Ask a friend to do a mock interview. Record it with phone or something so that you can see your body language. Offer to return the favor if they're in transition as well. Again, that's why some of these kind of transition. Small groups can be so beneficial. Try and start a new positive habit, whatever that is. It doesn't have to be anything big. It can be something that takes, 3 minutes a day, but just something that you think will be positive that you can use the time and kind of stick with. And if you haven't already, start think about, again, an informal, kind of transition group. Some folks that are have some commonality with your search that you could get together with coffee once a week, once every other week, something like that. And that's it. Yes.
Okay, salary. How do you pair up like your experience and your work experience and know that the salary range is a good match for you? And is there a website page where you can go to look up and see what the salary range would be for that position? Because we're in the South, so it's a little bit of a variance versus relative other parts of the country.
Yeah. I mean,
So I interviewed for a job and it was kind of, I hate to put it this way, it was kind of beneath my educational level and experience. But I thought about taking it, but then we thought it wouldn't look right on the resume for where I'm trying to go
okay.
from a career standpoint.
Okay. I mean, did you have a sense for that going into it,
I didn't
or?
realize it was-
Okay. Got it. And what was it was it just was it the job itself you felt was, I mean, I know the salary was low, but was the job itself kind of doing stuff that was more entry level than what you were seeking, or were they just looking to pay somebody less than
like-
they should? Okay. Got it. Got it.
So that's
Yeah.
more a case of, is that a job that you wanted or that had opportunity?
That was
And
the question.
if,
Right.
it sounds like the salary was commensurate with with the responsibility,
Mhm.
even though it was way below what you wanted.
And that's what I was trying to figure out is what's a matchup? I mean, aren't there website pages?
I mean, there's like Glassdoor, and I mean, there's dozen of them out there. But I just really question the accuracy and sometimes, I mean, like the ranges are so wide, they're somewhat
Yeah.
meaningless, right? Like I've seen some banker ones, but it's like, well, this, starting salary is between $100,000 and $500,000. Well, like that doesn't really tell me much, right? I mean, like I don't really know where to negotiate, right? I think you obviously can use your own career and experience as a guide, right? If you're doing something that's somewhat similar to sort of where you were. And I think your other best resource is just to try and network around people who are in the industry, right? I mean, I think that's a fair question to ask. Where do you start people off in this role, or what sort of salaries do you typically see with people who are, doing these types of things? I think that's a fair question to ask, not necessarily in an interview, but when you're doing your kind of pre-interview networking with folks in the industry.
Yeah, people that come here, if you remember Jennifer, that she was HR, she came here. Georgia might have, just depending on where you are, Krista, might have reference points because they've talked to a lot of people. And that would probably be just try and drill down to where you are and where your company is.
And that's the $1 million question.
Right.
What's Thank you.
Sure. Other questions?
Anybody online have a question?
Yeah, anybody in the chat?
Do you advocate for what your current salary is coming up in the negotiation?
You mean if they ask you?
Yeah, so there's differences of opinion, as I've been able to glean, in that some say it's relevant and others say it's completely irrelevant, because the way that the company that you're headed to budgets for that position or how they value it. So I come from the HR world and I see this across the board. Different companies valuing a certain position, even high-ranking leadership positions, very differently from one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've always feared on the side of encouraging them to talk more about where they see this position budgeted. Within their overall compensation, as opposed to me just telling them what I'm making currently. The responsibilities could be wildly different at the company that you're going to, just based on how they operate. So I was.
Yeah, no, I mean, I mean, going back to like my negotiation class in business school, I mean, negotiation 101 is like whoever moves first generally ends up worse off. I mean, they've done all sorts of studies around that, right? I mean, obviously there's exceptions to every rule, but you're right. Whoever kind of puts the first number out generally ends up in a worse position. And so if you can get them to tell you, that's fine. I mean, but I also wouldn't preclude myself from a process if they were like, you know, kind of being coy around it. I also am a believer in not wasting time. So, you know, you're right. I mean, if they sort of ask about current salary, be like, well, can you give me a sort of sense of, you know, what the range is here? Maybe see if you can get them to speak first. And then, you know, if all of a sudden the range is $40,000 more than you were making, you know, maybe it's like, oh, okay. But that's probably honestly not going to be the case, I would think. And so, you know, I've always been pretty transparent with it. And, you know, and I think you've just got to cage it with your sort of expectations, right? Of, you know, well, I've been making X, but, you know, I mean, like I've been in situations before, right, where I worked in banking. Banking generally pays a little bit better than kind of the corporate world, just for reference. But, you know, where I was, I knew I was going to lose my job in the financial crisis. Like my bank got bought and I kind of like saw the writing on the wall that my whole group was going to get let go. So I'd started looking for jobs before that happened, which it did end up happening. And, you know, people would ask me and I would be like, well, you know, here's kind of where I am, but I recognize, you know, banking pays a little bit better than the corporate world. And so, you know, I envision myself taking a pay cut, like in somewhere in the magnitude of X, right? And, you know, and sometimes they'd be like, oh, well, you know, that's fine. Or, well, we're not even going to pay you that much, right? Kind of thing. And so again, not wasting time, but kind of communicating your expectations. Because if you just say, well, you know, this is where I am. On the flip side, I guess you could say, you know, here's where I am. But, you know, again, I think with my experience and such, you know, one of the reasons I'm trying to transition out of this role is I think that I have a lot more to offer. And I sense that, you know, I'm maybe underpaid relative to the market. So I'm really looking to move to, you know, why, right? And sort of setting that expectation. If you think that that's the case, right? You know, if you're making 50, but you really feel like you ought to be making 70, okay, we'll make the case of why you think that, and kind of set that expectation up front. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm a believer in, you never want to put the cart before the horse and start negotiating salary early. But if there is a dialogue to be had around, at least around ranges and expectations, I think it's better to have that sooner rather than later. Because the last thing you want to do is, yeah, go through a whole interview process and then, you know, get to the, you know, goal line and be like, oh yeah, this job pays 30% less than kind of what I was expecting or what I have to make. Right. And so this was all kind of a waste of time. So, yeah.
Practice your interview.
Yeah, I would say good point. It's a nugget, right? Yeah. You have practiced your interview. So it wasn't a total waste of time, but, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, that's good. I completely agree with establishing the range that you're both on the same page, and that you're even interested in what they're thinking about paying. But then the common question of, well, tell us what you're making now, and then anchoring them at that, and then that could become a limitation.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's good. Good context.
Sure. Anything
Any other
else?
questions, comments? Cool.
Right on
Thank you,
time.
Jay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Great series. Everybody have a wonderful holiday.
Yes, everybody have a good, safe Memorial Day.
3 weeks.
Right. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks,
Thank
Lori.
you.